Welcome to Part 2, Student-Directed Instruction. Student-directed instruction occurs during work time when lots of simultaneous activity occurs, and it serves several purposes. Students develop personal responsibility for learning. Students hone their learning skills and metacognitive skills. Students learn from one another in group settings and in peer teaching arrangements. The teacher is able to target different learning activities to meet the needs of specific students and is also able to assist students directly. Once again, student data plays a central role in assigning student-directed activities during work time. You will recall the student learning plan that was introduced in the instructional planning module. This student-specific plan helps teachers individualize instruction and assign leveled activities from the learning plan grid for each student based on the results of pretests, other assessments, and what we know about them as learners. This practice is consistent with our first indicator in Part 2. Teachers individualize instruction based on pretest results to provide support for some students and enhanced learning opportunities for others. Let's jump right into the action. The following teacher explains and demonstrates for us how pretest results changed her lessons for work time, as she had to rearrange some of her student-directed instruction groups.
Well, my plans for tomorrow I have just thrown in the trash, because based on the results from the pretest, what I was going to do for some students would not be the best use of their time. So looking at the pre-assessment data, it's instead of a rotation, it's going to be much more of I need to speak with you two students for 5 minutes so I can build them a foundation of what the rest of the group will be doing. As long as my line segments never ever cross, as long as they never cross and they're segments, they can be considered line segments. I noticed when you guys took the assessment, there was a couple tricky ones. One showed rulers, and they showed a bunch of rulers and asking you which are. Okay, it doesn't matter if they use rulers or pipes or jump ropes or railroad tracks. You're just plain intersecting lines. My square is not going to fit in there, Ron, if I'm doing just plain intersecting lines. Once I can make it, once I can make a perfect little square in there, that's when it becomes a perpendicular line. In your journal, I want you to draw.
What's the perpendicular line?
Where they go perfectly straight, and I can put my little square there. I can put a little square in there. Mm-hmm. So it's looking at individual kids to see where their areas of need are and to help build them up before they go into a whole group type lesson.
And now listen as a teacher explains how this pretest data is applied in her classroom, and then we'll peek in on how she and her student teacher share this method in a team meeting.
I do the most pretesting with math. Every time that I start a new unit, whether it's multiplication, division, measurement, addition, subtraction, number sense, I always start with a pretest to see what they already know. I then have a spreadsheet with all their names and the different standards that the pretest covers, and then I just check off if they got it correct or incorrect. And so I get an idea of what students come in with a lot of knowledge and what students come in with very little knowledge. And I emphasize to the students that the pretest covers things that we're going to cover during the unit, and I don't expect them to know anything and they won't be graded, just so that they don't get frustrated about the task. And so I take a look at their pre-assessment. Students, I've had 4 students who tend to master the pretest. And so those 4 students, I then go on to extend the learning. I've had them grouped so that they're completing 4th grade math. I also have extension activities for them to complete. Whereas students who come in with very little knowledge, I then know that they're going to be in a separate group where they're going to be receiving a lot of additional support. So even after the group lesson and having the students independently work, I know that I'm going to have to pull that group and work with them to provide additional support. And so far this year, I've had 3 groups in my math class. I have the group that tends to need the 4th grade level math. I have the students who are doing well with just the class lesson and can learn independently. And then I have a group that needs additional support. And I guess with each unit, the students are always going back and forth between the groups. I have students who might be in the group that needs a lot of additional support, go to the group that needs, just needs the class instruction and does not need additional support. And so it's just very flexible. The students are, it's very fluid where the students go back and forth depending on what, the content, the unit that we're working on and whether or not they have that background knowledge and need the additional support. And I think one thing that's worked really well in our classroom is that, we're always pre-assessing them with our math units that we're teaching in order to differentiate in math. We're always assessing them in reading. What we did was we pre-assessed them on Our Changing Earth to see what they already knew about day and night, the reasons for the seasons. And what Sarah then did, actually it's right here, what Sarah then did is we broke them into 3 groups. Students who already have mastered the unit, they already know everything about day and night seasons. And then we have the opposite, students who know very little. And we have the students in between. And we came up with activities, or actually Sarah came up with activities of, students who, I don't know if you want to share with the group.
I was just going to say that, we had 2 kids that really mastered it. So what I did was I created a language arts prompt so that they actually had to work on writing complete sentences, work on showing the evidence of why, and just a lot of the same things they've been doing in nonfiction writing, those elements. And then for the other kids, I would group them into different groups based on their level. 1 was completely did not know anything, and 2 was getting there. So I would group them together as well, and then they had to complete another activity. For the ones, the activity was a little more basic. For the 2s, it was a little harder. So
the higher level was practicing their writing to explain what they knew.
Exactly.
Were the ones who didn't know anything about day and night, were they working on science activities?
Yes, they were working on a science experiment where we had a light, and they had to actually physically move it around the light to tell what it would be, to tell what if it would be day or night and what season and everything.
Yeah, but we found that to be very successful, so that's something that we're going to continue to do for other units as well.
Wow, did you see how those teachers used the pretest data to differentiate learning activities during work time? Let's continue with yet another teacher's explanation of how she uses pretest and other assessment results to plan her instruction.
What I'm doing in writing is looking at, as you look at students' writing, you look at the standard, but you also look at what do most of the kids need to know for a whole group. So you're assessing their writing, thinking about what's a whole group lesson. What is it that certain kids need that other kids don't need? And that would be your small group for guided writing. And that could be reteaching, or it could be extension. These kids are ready to do paragraphing. They need to go on and learn to do paragraphing. Or these kids are really ready to write closings. And we've had some groups like that this year because we noticed these kids are doing this. So we are using that assessment. It's more of an ongoing kind of assessment versus a standard assessment. I don't give like a writing test. So, and then the individual conferences, which let us either, as we're conferencing, we're either discovering commonalities. So when we take notes, we see what individuals have in common for a small group or whole group. And also there are things that you just teach right away. So you think about, as you're conferencing, I'm always looking at what does the child need to know as a writer? That's going to help him. Is it something I can teach him quickly right now, or is it something I need to get more intensive with? So that's how we use our assessments.
The most common form of student-directed instruction is independent work, when students complete their assignments individually. This does not mean that students working independently are completing the same assignment. This is where the student learning plan comes in handy. It allows teachers to assign students activities that are consistent with their learning needs and get them to objective mastery. Student-directed instruction also occurs through peer teaching or peer learning. The act of teaching and assisting another student strengthens the learning of the peer teacher. And finally, having small groups of students who complete assignments provided by the teacher is another form of student-directed instruction. We spent some time on the types of student groups in classroom management, but let's quickly review here. Groups are fluid, meaning they change regularly according to specific learning needs. Groups may be homogeneous, meaning students are grouped according to a similarity in learning need for a particular objective, allowing the teacher to target the type and intensity of instruction or reteaching or review that is delivered. Groups may be heterogeneous, meaning students are grouped randomly with differences in learning needs or skills. We've provided some frequently asked questions about heterogeneous group learning or cooperative learning in your workbook. It asks and answers a lot of good questions and provides some suggestions and guidelines for group work in your classroom during work time. Work time provides a great opportunity for teachers to continue to build relationships with students, observe their learning, inquire about their interests, and reinforce rules and procedures. In teacher-directed instruction, we saw some ways that teachers interact and build relationships with their students during whole class instruction and in teacher-directed small groups. This practice continues in student-directed instruction. We all know how important it is to meet students where they are at. Well, this time we're speaking literally. Our first indicator states, all teachers travel to all areas in which students are working. Here, we'll see this in action in several classrooms during work time. Which one applies to your teaching situation?
While our higher groups are reading independently, we can just say, if walk around, does anybody have any questions? I can briefly just walk around and see if they're always supposed to be jotting something down in their thinking notes or their reader's notebook. So that's a quick way for me to see, if they're jotting something down, well, first of all, are they even writing anything? And second of all, I can kind of glance and see what they're writing, if they're on the right page or not.
And you're going to see if you can figure out some of the characteristics. So due to a plant, water it. So of course it has to be big and full to push against that cell wall.
Is 6.
Exactly. So you can count up.
You couldn't think of a title? Okay, well, what is this about?
I sleep before October to April. Before I go to sleep, I fatten.
Oh, April.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What you all saying? Do y'all agree or disagree? Okay, tell me what doesn't look right about it.
We do a lot of group activities, and I tend to move randomly from group to group to see where things are at. Sometimes just watching the student interactions, sometimes questioning groups to get them to take their thinking farther or to get them back on track.